And from what we've seen, you worked on an animation project. Actually, you're seeing it now. Can we start this and run it so that you can actually see? Electricity is extremely important now because, as the president mentioned, the Philippines now has a 6.4% growth rate for the first quarter, but a stumbling block and a bottleneck for many businesses is actually the price of electricity. And if the government can begin to work on this, both in the short term and in the long term, then there can be some kind of measure to capitalize on the high growth rate. Now, let's look at the animation so you can get a sense of exactly what goes into making electricity so expensive in the Philippines. This is Rappler Animate, written by Lala Rimando and drawn by artist Emil Mercado.
Filipino consumers pay the highest electricity rates in Asia. Why? We paid an average of 9 pesos and 14 cents per kilowatt hour a month in 2011, or about 25 cents in 2012. More expensive than Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and even industrialized Japan. The electricity bill reflects the following. The power plants that process energy from sources like coal and fuel turn them into electricity that lights up our homes, street lights, powers our gadgets, and keeps our factories going. These generation charges account for over half of the bill. Then the cost of transporting the electricity, still in its high voltage form, from the power plants through transmission towers to the power distributors is reflected in the transmission charges. Distributors charge for bringing power already reduced to 220 volts to us, users. Systems losses refer to the electricity wasted because they were lost in transmission or were pilfered. Universal charges are various costs passed on to consumers. And subsidies are the discounts given to senior citizens and lifeline consumers who are using less than 100 kilowatt a month. Then, of course, government taxes. All these are moving parts. They go up or down, and usually they go up. The bill is high because some costs of operations increased. For example, almost half of our energy sources are coal and oil, mostly imported from the Middle East. But these are capital-intensive businesses that also have to recover through profits. To encourage investments, the government guarantees their margin. When companies import, the foreign exchange fluctuations may be expensive and eat into their guaranteed profits. They can recover through the ICIRA, or incremental currency exchange rate adjustment mechanism. The power plants formerly owned by state-owned Napocor can also recover profits. If their purchased power and fuel costs eat into these guaranteed margins, we feel these via GRAM, or Generation Rate Adjustment Mechanism, which increases the generation charges. The same for state-owned transmission company or Transco. If the cost of transporting high-voltage power to retailers pull down their assured profits of 15%, they can recover through TRAM, or Transmission Rate Adjustment Mechanism. And Napocor, which is left with bringing light to far-flung areas or islands, also pass on the cost of SPUG, or Small Power Utilities Group, most of them using expensive diesel. These are added to our bill through universal charges. And because they are public utilities, what goes up and down in our electric bill required approval of the Energy Regulatory Commission. In the past, the state-owned Napocor was inefficient. In the 1990s, rolling blackouts prompted government to promise investors it will buy all the supply generated by the independent power producers. When the Asian financial crisis struck in 1997-98, demand slowed down but consumers still paid for the excess supply. Worse, in 2002, the government did not let Napocor, which had incurred a lot of debts, charge higher fees. This resulted in Napocor's massive losses that we are now paying for. The Electric Power Industry Reform Act, or EPIRA, was introduced in 2001 to address the sins of the past. The new law broke apart Napocor's monopoly of generation and transmission businesses. Through Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corp, or PISAM, the state-owned power plants were sold to private investors. The transmission service was sold to a Filipino-Chinese consortium called National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, or NGCP. The debts of Napocor, amounting to $6.5 billion in 2001, were partly assumed by national government, and the rest are charged to our bill over time. This is reflected in the universal charges. PISAM, while it was supposed to earn revenues from the privatized power plants, incurred debts because it was not able to immediately sell some of them, so it had to maintain these aging plants. PISAM will recover these debts, worth about 130 billion pesos, via universal charges. NGCP, on the other hand, are recovering some of Napocor's debts before the transmission assets were turned over through TRAM. These profit-related reasons and sins of the past are passed on to us, consumers, and are tucked into the electricity bill. Another item that you will soon find in there is the feed-in tariff. This is to encourage investors to tap renewable sources like geothermal, hydro, wind, solar, biomass, and run-of-river energy. Because these are from indigenous sources, they could eventually reduce electricity prices. These are not dependent on coal and oil imports, which are vulnerable to foreign exchange volatility. But what should really drive electricity prices down are market forces. The EPIRA created the WESM, or the Wholesale Electricity Spot Market. It is where power producers sell their electricity units and customers buy at a price they want. These systems the EPIRA promised were supposed to be in place in 2011. However, there are still few generation players, and those who have built new power plants are not generating enough electricity to make trading at WESM a truly competitive and thriving one. Buyers are not yet bidding for the lowest price, but for available supply. When there are more new power projects and the private sector will stake more capital in them, then the electricity bill will soon be lowered. Lala Rimando, Rappler, Manila.
Rappler's live coverage of Philippine President Benigno Aquino's State of the Nation address. You've just seen an animation on why the cost of electricity is so high in the Philippines. So, Lala, is there any chance that electricity will go down?
No, not yet. I mean, like for example, July, we're expecting prices to actually go up because Malampaya, our natural gas resource, which sits right next to Palawan,
Yes.
is gonna go on a. It's going to shut down for a.
So supply will be
will
thin.
be thinner. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
So and it, of course, it follows basic economics: lower supply, higher price.
higher price. We're also seeing that Meralco looks like it will be increasing its prices as well. Is that because of the flow of supply of
Yes,
natural
the
gas?
electricity bill
Yeah.
that Meralco bills us includes all the charges, their generation, transmission, distribution. So all the chunks that we've seen in the animation
Right.
are all in that bill.
Well, what's so interesting is there was nothing mentioned in the president's speech about Benham Rice, natural oil and gas. I mean, there was a find there this year that could actually bring in significant investments into the country, something like 70 million. Is that correct?
Benham Rice or Reed Bank?
Oh, Reed Bank. I'm sorry. Yes, Reed
Which
Bank.
sits
Sorry.
right next to
Yes.
Malampaya.
Correct.
It's basically the same vein, they said.
Correct.
And it just might be, it might have more gas deposits.
Is it 70
actually.
million dollar investment? Is this? I'm
That's
pulling
on
this
one
out of-
workflow.
Right.
Because when it's a capital intensive business.
Okay.
Exploration, they have like a work program where every now and then they chunk in a big amount of funds.
Right.
Because obviously the equipment, doing it right in the middle of the sea is pretty expensive.
Right.
And which also brings us to another topic that
Which the president brought up. Mining.
Yes, mining, yes.
The jump for us here is that this Philex company is the one that discovered the natural gas, and Philex is the country's largest mining
firm.
firm. The president talked about looking at raising revenues from mining companies, which is something that some of the major mining companies like Philex has actually said they would be pleased to do. The Philippines excise tax is 2%. What do you make of his statements? Was it enough?
Actually, President Aquino has always been saying we want more revenues because he's following the line. It's our natural resource. We have to earn more. We have to get more wealth from this because there's a lot of countries out there also dependent on natural resources, and they're rich, we're poor. So, however, he did mention in a previous report, in a previous interview, that between syntax and mining, pushing a legislation, revenue-generating legislation for that is not a priority for mining.
But yet, technically, mining could also bring in tremendous revenue, right? Because the Philippines sits on we have the 5th largest mining resources in the world. So, is this not being tapped? This is something that Congress can do something about.
The thing with mining is you extract minerals from under the earth, and then you have to process it. We don't have that yet. There's only a few mining companies that have a processing plant.
Right.
Most of them are actually hauled.
It's taken out of the country.
Taken out of the country, and the steel and the gold materials are processed outside.
So it actually doesn't bring enough to the country unless we bring the industry in.
Yes.
Are there any plans to do
that? I've heard Manuel Pangilinan, the chair of Philex, saying that we don't have a supply chain, or what did he mention? Something like we don't have the economies of scale here to do that.
To make it worthwhile as an investment.
Right.
Going back to the electricity, part of what makes it expensive is that the government actually guarantees profits for the investors, for the companies that are there. Why?
Because it's a capital-intensive business, but I think the check and balance there is the ERC, because there's a formula on how much is guaranteed profits. Whatever goes up or down in that line has to be approved by the ERC. That's why in the animate you see all of these, funny sounding terms like gram, tram, ICERA.
Right.
It's very technical,
but it's so interesting because when I look at that whole thing, it looks like there were band-aid solutions over the years that have never really been pulled back. So one of the things that I was hoping was that the State of the Nation address would help address the high cost of electricity. He didn't really, did he?
No, he talked about lighting areas in far-flung areas, islands even.
Right.
No mention at all about how to address a looming crisis, actually.
Well, for those of you who may have missed President Aquino's State of the Nation address, you can go on www.rappler.com under Thought Leaders. It is there in full. You can also visit Rappler's blog, which has went over every single development in it. And there are the pictures, the people who are there. We're waiting for Ayi Makaraig to talk to some of the lawmakers who were there at Batasang Pambansa to give us a perspective.